Hello and welcome to the first video of That Other Channel I Don't Want My Boss to Know About. My name is David Boos and I want to remain anonymous. This is the world's first talking head YouTube channel that's filmed and exported decadently in 2x anamorphic mode, thus helping you to see myself and my screen next to each other in this super wide image, which is actually at an absurd aspect ratio of 355:1, while helping me, hopefully, to hide my belly. I was planning to actually start this channel a little bit later, but since the news of the first official case of Me Too in the organ world broke recently, well, actually a few weeks back by now, I felt that this might be the right moment to collect my thoughts on this issue and share them, since I feel that there are elements worth mentioning that are absent in many of the discussions surrounding this topic. One thing I have to share in advance though. My goal for this channel is to share my thoughts on certain matters, but after picking this as a first topic, I quickly ran into trouble trying to limit my points to the issue because it is a subject that touches on all sorts of other elements in our society. In some cases I try to explain those side avenues as well, but I quickly realized how this made the topic explode in length. In fact, this is already way longer than I wanted this originally to be. But rather than spending even more time in trying to edit this down, I'll leave it at that and hope that people will still find some useful bits in it. For a variety of practical reasons, I'm going to record and publish the different chapters separately and put them into one large Me Too playlist, so to speak, which would also allow me to add things later if the need arises. In any case, for the future, I'm hoping to make these videos much more confined on specific topics which I can explore in far less time. That would also enable me to just talk on certain matters that I find important that I'm referring to in this video and use those videos as a reference for the future, thus allowing me to get to the nitty-gritty much quicker. But because I got carried away, I decided instead to start with a huge topic such as this instead. Don't be scared though, the next videos will be less controversial and shorter as well. Also, just a quick introduction beforehand if you haven't seen one of my other channels. I'm a musician, filmmaker, project manager, translator and many other things. And the reason that I chose to talk about this topic now is because it strikes quite close to home. On one hand, this is the first publicly discussed case of Me Too allegations in the organ world. On the other hand, I actually got to know the alleged perpetrator personally on a couple of occasions. And while that experience is definitely not exhaustive, it is a first-hand experience that allows me to compare what transpires from the media with my own personal impressions. I found this to be an important puzzle piece in forming my own judgment, and hopefully it'll help me not to fall into the trap of seeing things too much from one or the other side only. As you can see already from the title of this video, there's a bit of an homage going on to Adam Smith. But more than that, I found this title to be actually quite fitting with regards to what I'm really looking to achieve with this video. When thinking about the title, I wanted to avoid something too vague on one hand or something too clickbaity on the other. It was quite hard to decide for myself what I really wanted to achieve with this, rather than just giving my opinion on Me Too. Chapter 1 of Me Too, what's part of it and what isn't. Before commenting on the issue at hand, I want to have a look at what actually is included in Me Too and what isn't. It's certainly a very broad topic, and while at times it seems almost all-encompassing, it can also be very limited, almost restrictive in what is considered to be part of it and what not. There also seems to be a difference between what is publicly considered to be part of Me Too, as communicated by politicians, the media and celebrities with a large enough following to be heard, and what average people that have picked up the Me Too hashtag on social media consider it to be. To define it properly, let's quickly recap the history of the Me Too movement, even if it's a rather recent phenomenon and should still be on most people's minds. While the phrase has been in use as early as 2006, it really turned into the phenomenon it is now with the allegations against Harvey Weinstein, raised by several women in 2017. While theoretically it is used for all sorts of cases of sexual misconduct, its focus lies quite obviously in certain areas. First, it spread like a wildfire in Hollywood, where it seemed like one half of Hollywood accused the other half of abuse. After Harvey Weinstein, other celebrities were accused, among others Dustin Hoffman, Ben Affleck, and also Kevin Spacey, who, interestingly enough, was the first case which spread the topic from male-on-female abuse to male-on-male abuse. It was already then, however, that we could witness a difference in treatment of those topics, as Spacey used the occasion to declare himself openly gay, rather than actually addressing the sexual misconduct with a minor. And while the media did, to a certain degree, acknowledge a few prominent male victims of sexual misconduct, such as Terry Crews, it did seem like they treated it more as a curiosity or something they have to mention as well, just to defend themselves preemptively from being biased, rather than viewing it as an inherent part of the problem. The reality, however, was that metoo was almost always uttered together with other buzzwords such as toxic masculinity, violence against women, rape culture, sexism, misogyny, etc. The evolving narrative did focus on women being the primary victims of sexual misconduct, and more importantly, the so-called patriarchy being at least partially responsible for it. According to accusers and the media, it quickly became consensual that misogyny, the alleged rape culture, and so-called toxic masculinity were what's responsible for all those cases of sexual misconduct. Male victims were a footnote that had to be mentioned but never took center stage in the discussion. Any attempt at even bringing that up would mostly be met with outrage, as the suggestion itself would be another example of how women have been systemically oppressed or marginalized by the patriarchy. From Hollywood, the whole thing spread further. Quickly, everybody and their dog shared a Me Too story on Facebook and Twitter, in many cases without naming names or giving any proof, but always certain to receive a good degree of support. #YouGoGirl. Not only did everybody share stories, plenty of goalposts were moved as well. Suddenly, the already precarious question of what is consensual became an even hotter issue, but all sorts of unwanted attention at the workplace, like asking a colleague to go out for dinner, suddenly were included in Me Too. Several articles were written about the psychological terror that is catcalling, and basically we arrived at a point where if a woman had any regrets about whatever attention you gave her yesterday, she could accuse you of sexual misconduct the next day. It should be added, however, that the discussion about catcalling was never extended to male-on-male catcalling, since apparently that's a bit of a different thing. It became apparent that there are double standards at work and that there are certain internal contradictions, such as fighting for the right of gay people to publicly express their sexuality on one hand, but at the same time asking for catcalling to be punished or at least criticizing it heavily. If somebody like me has been in the situation of being catcalled by gay men in the past, then it begs the question whether I'm now also a victim and fully qualified to participate in this discussion on equal footing, in which case gay men should keep their sexuality for themselves? But that would probably go against the equality of these people that our society has been fighting for. So how is it that they're allowed to catcall men, but men shouldn't catcall women? Am I at least allowed to be slightly disgusted by being catcalled, such as women are when being catcalled by men, or would that make me actually a homophobe? What this mental gymnastics are meant to showcase is the fact that we quickly reached a point in the outrage where clear definitions were being sacrificed in favor of a seemingly justified anger, a greater good pointed in the general direction of whatever evil we currently perceive. So while everybody had a story to share, and that certainly fueled the rage in the media, what really carried the story further than being a short hype, because remember when we were all Charlie, Paris, London, and changed our profile pictures accordingly? Yeah, that really showed them. So what really made the story stick and defined it were stories about big names. Nobody, hopefully, lost their job because they didn't read the non-verbal signs so well and kept complimenting their female co-worker even though she can't stand him. But from Hollywood, the Me Too scandal spread to other areas, mostly, however, in academia and the music industry. Is it mere coincidence that all these sectors of the entertainment industry and academia are dominated by so-called liberal politics, and some of the alleged perpetrators were even actively funding Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, for instance? Some were even vocal feminists, which is an interesting contradiction to their alleged behavior. And let's not forget that one of the most vocal actresses speaking up in favor of women's rights, Meryl Streep, has been referring to Harvey Weinstein as a god in the past and has taken it upon herself to defend Roman Polanski. Quite obviously, in some circles, there's a huge disconnect between separate actions, all of which seem to live a life of their own in the heads of some activists, as they apparently cannot see that these things are interconnected and that the left hand doesn't know or doesn't want to know what the right hand is doing. Having said that, of course, doesn't mean that there haven't been any cases of conservatives being accused of sexual misconduct. The big famous ones, however, are mostly from the rather left-leaning corner of society. Once the whole thing reached the world of classical music, it was already at a point where public interest waned, at least in the big media. Not that I dispute that sexual misconduct happens, but after sending shockwaves through the media with its initial revelations, it does feel like those aftershocks, reaching further and further distant areas of public awareness, are giving us diminishing returns. It almost feels like some of the cases are now brought up before it's too late and the world stops caring about metoo. That is, by the way, not necessarily saying that what is happening in the classical music world is any less atrocious. It's just that nobody really cares what happens in that small corner of the music industry, and that the media isn't really as interested in further revelations of people most never heard of as it is in the next big story. And while prolonged silence due to a feeling of shame has always been a factor in victims not telling their story right away, after metoo made it so easy to share your story and gain support, it really does beg the question why it takes people another year or more to tell their stories. That doesn't mean that those stories aren't necessarily true, but it's at least worth the consideration that strategic placement and timing of those stories might play a role as well. Another interesting aspect is that while metoo is the hashtag used for sexual misconduct, Wikipedia refers to actually sexual harassment and sexual assault, terms that are in my opinion a lot harsher than many of the things included in metoo. So while metoo is supposed to include all sexual misconduct, it publicly almost never includes rape in the family, which is the most widespread form of rape. It never includes violent rape by strangers, which is unfortunately becoming more widespread again, at least in certain parts of Europe. And also doesn't include sexual abuse, such as in the church. There has been a special hashtag #ChurchToo, but I've at least never seen it, and most importantly, the media hasn't really picked up on it in a concerted effort, at least not in combination with the Me Too movement. The recent revelations in the American Catholic Church seem to be confined to their own corner of news rather than being combined with Me Too. For this very reason, this video will not touch upon the sexual abuse scandals plaguing the church or other forms of rape in the family or in the wild. We'll restrict this to the field that is mostly covered by the Me Too movement. I should also add that I've seen people post their private stories of abuse in their families on Facebook in the wake of Me Too. In most of these cases, they've received some support from their friends, which is a good thing, but it seemed more like an opportunity to vent than a revelation that would lead to any legal cases or something of that sort. Most importantly, however, there is no prominent case of this known to me that has been picked up by the media on a larger scale, which clearly shows how limited the traction such a story can generate these days. Only if there are big names of powerful people involved does it become big news. Generally speaking, it does seem, interestingly enough, that many of the accusations are generating more public outrage than actual legal procedures. As such, it is worrying to see in how many cases allegations of sexual misconduct were enough to have people lose their jobs, have their family lives destroyed, and some of the alleged perpetrators committed suicide due to the immense public pressure. So far, I know of not a single case that's been closed in front of a court on this matter. No one has been officially ruled guilty of any of those allegations, but many, many lives have already been ruined. So to sum up, MeToo claims to be a broad movement directed against all sorts of sexual harassment and sexual assault, but upon closer inspection, it's hard to deny that certain stories get more attention than others. They get more press than others, and that some of the many aspects potentially causing these scandals are more emphasized in the narrative than others. As is quite often the case these days, emotions win over logic, and outrage is being abused to further a political agenda. In the case of MeToo, it seems the political spin is a feminist one, in which sexism, misogyny and toxic masculinity are supposedly the driving forces that lead to the predominant abuse of women, ranging from catcalling via unwanted attention at the workplace to full-blown rape, while at the same time only including other groups of victims as well as other types of sexual abuse that don't happen to women in the workplace on the side. While it probably is true that the percentage of women being harassed at the workplace is higher than that of men, when you want to understand the problem and the reasons behind it, you must at least also consider all those other scenarios, as well as defining quite clearly what is part of the equation you're working with. An explanation that focuses solely on women being the victims of sexism by men does indeed exclude those other scenarios from the equation, and is thus tendentious in the best case and manipulative in the worst. But rather than accusing MeToo of being only a politically driven movement in the ongoing war of identity politics, I'd much rather want to analyze some of the elements in play, so that we can get a clearer picture of what I believe are the main factors at play in this situation. The common political narrative hands us an easy explanation for all this. It's the fault of powerful sexist men who do not respect the sovereignty of women and also men over their own bodies. And then there are skeptics who believe it's just a big vendetta against people who were more successful than others and is a way to boost the victims' careers at the cost of the alleged perpetrators. But ultimately, I'm afraid there's no easy answer to this problem. It's not as black and white as it seems, and therefore my answers might not be black and white answers either. So if that's what you're looking for, you can probably better turn this off right now and save yourself another hour or more of your life. If not, be my guest and let's move on. See you soon in chapter 2, where I'm going to talk about the specific allegations against James David Christie and the concept of innocent until proven guilty.